Okay, Boker Tov, welcome back. So we find ourselves in Masechet Beitzah Daf Yud Amud Bet. We saw yesterday the Mishnah. We're talking about different cases of designating birds before Yom Tov, and then one comes on Yom Tov and finds the same birds. Those birds are not there, or they've changed location, or something's a little bit different. And the question is whether we can assume, whether we can be toler that those are the same birds or part of the same birds that were there, and therefore not muktzah, or do we have to say no, those original birds had left and these are new birds, and therefore they are muktzah, right? So that was the Mishnah. Just very quickly, the Mishnah near the top of the Amud, it said Zimen shcholim matzah levanim, levanim matzah shcholim, shnayim matzah shlosha asulim. Okay, we saw this yesterday. We learned in the Gemara that the first two cases of the Mishnah are in fact the same case, right? Zimen shcholim matzah levanim, one designated blackbirds and they came and found white birds, or white birds and they came and found blackbirds. The way that the Gemara explained that case was that actually you had these two kanim next to one another, and in the one you had white birds and in the one you had blackbirds, and you come the next day and you've designated them both, but they've switched places. So then we said that's going to be asur. We don't assume that they've actually switched places, but we assume that the original birds have left and these are other birds, and therefore that would be asur, right? We also said shnayim u'matzah shlosha, a person designated two birds, came and now found three birds, so that's also going to be asur. And again, the Gemara explained, we have a ma'nafsha. So if we say that the two birds are gone and you now have three new birds, well then clearly those will be muktzah. And if you say that the two birds that were designated yesterday are still there, but there's now three birds, so there's another one, so one of those birds is going to be muktzah. You don't know which, and it's mixed in with the others, and therefore the whole thing is going to be muktzah. Okay, why don't we say batel barov? Right, we have a din of bittul throughout the Torah. When we say that we have a majority of bittul when it comes to solid objects, tzchad betray, right? Maybe we're used to thinking of a bittul in a ratio of 60. That's when you have a liquid mixture. When it comes to the halachot of kashrut, right? So if you have a liquid mixture, you have a pot of milk, which falls into a drop of milk, which falls into the famous pot of chicken soup. So long as you can't see it and you can't taste it, it's a ratio of 60 to 1. That is bittul. But when it's solid objects, a simple majority is enough, and there it would be nullified. So over here, that's why maybe the Gemara said we have a manafshach. It's not so simple to say if we knew for certain that two of the birds are the same and there's another one, maybe we could say bittul, but we can't say that because maybe all of the birds are in fact muktzah anyway. There is another question here which will come up in a moment, that even if we were to say that we knew it, we can't say bittul maybe because it's a davar sheyesh lo matirin. We saw a couple of times already in our Masechet. We'll see Tosfot invokes that concept in the next case. So the next case in the Mishnah was, so those were the three cases, which are actually two cases, where we said it's going to be asur. The next case, the Mishnah said, shlosha u'matzah shnayim mutarim. If you found three, you designated three, and you come back and you find that there's only two, so that is going to be mutar. That is going to be mutar because we assume that the two birds that are there now are two of the original three. Right, so it says the Gemara over here on the last of the narrow lines. The Gemara says shlosha matzah shnayim mutarin. My tama, what's the reason for this? Hane in hunino. These are them. These are the same birds. It's just one of them that's gone, but two are the same that were already there. So, So Tosfot over here, don't see any Rashi on that. Tosfot says, second Tosfot on the page, says, Chad minayim azala alma, the im tomal, right, it says Tosfot, why can we say this? We're using here as the halachic mechanism called tolin, which we find in a number of places, where we say, okay, these are the original birds, but we have here davar sheyesh lo matirin. All muktzah will be a davar sheyesh lo matirin by definition, because after Yom Tov it won't be muktzah anymore. So why don't we say, we saw already earlier in the Masechet, or we saw two different versions all the way back, I think it was on Daf Daled, two different versions as to whether we say Davar Sheish Lo Matirin is Batel, or Filu Be'elef, or not. But he said, so we're generally more stringent with the Davar Sheish Lo Matirin because we can wait until it's mutar anyway. Why don't we say that here? Says Tosfot, Kitalina Lekula B'Davar Sheish Lo Matirin Yesh Loma Do'il V'Nisharu Shnayim B'Mkomam V'Dai B'Chai Gavna Talina Lekula. So this is not an ordinary case of Davar Sheish Lo Matirin. Why? Because you've got two that are still there. And the two that are still there, so that kind of gives us, I guess, raglaim nadavar, maybe circumstantial evidence to say that it's probably still that, and therefore we don't have to be so stringent. We can rely on it. Okay, so now the question is, who does this opinion follow? We have a Beitzah elsewhere, which deals with a machloket between Rabbi and Chachamim, and at this point, the Gemara says this din now of our Mishnah follows Rabbi and does not follow Rabbanan. So let's see what the case is, and let's see why. So the Beitzah says like follows. It says, Lema manitin Rabbi ivelo Rabbanan. The Tanya. Hiniach maneh umatza matayim chulin u'maser shenim u'ravin ze bazeh. The case was, you had a maneh, you had 100 of maser sheni. So we explained yesterday, maser sheni, the money has got a certain level of kedusha. It needs to be used in Yerushalayim. And therefore, it's reasonable a person would not mix up the Maaser Sheni, which is Kodesh, with other stuff which is Chulin. So a person left, they had 100 of Maaser Sheni, Umatzah Matayim, and then they came along and found there was not, I remember leaving 100, and now I find 200. So what do we say? So Rabbi says, Rabbi says, we assume the 100 that you left initially is still there, but now there's another 100 as well. Okay, that's really more relevant to our first case in the Mishnah, but in any event, so he says now we have to treat it as chulin or maser shenim or avin zeh bazeh. We have to assume that part of that 200 that's now there is actually the maser sheni. Chachamim omrem akol chulin. Chachamim say no, everything here is chulin. Okay, we'll get to the second case in a minute because that concerns us more. Let's just see Rashi for a sec. Rashi says, "Eniach maneh." About 4 or 5 lines down from the wide lines in Rashi. Hiniach maneh mimaot maser sheni bateva, in some sort of box, some sort of container. You left 100 of your maser sheni money. Chulin u'maser sheni moravin zeh bazeh. Says echad chulin ve'eni yodea ezu. Okay, so you now have 200 in there. You have half of it is chulin and half of it is maser sheni. You don't know which is which. So what do? So says Rashi, notel hayafeh shebahen. You pick up that which is more, which is more yafeh. V'omer im zosha maser harei yafeh v'im chuleni teichavata mecholelet aleha. So you pick up the coins and you say, if this coin is maser sheni, so all good and well, that's fine. And if this is chulin, so I want to actually transfer the kedusha from the Maaser Sheni onto this. So in that way, because you can redeem the Maaser Sheni, right? Because you can switch it with Chulin, you are therefore able to you're therefore able to take that part out, and say this is Maaser Sheni no matter what, and from then on you can treat it that way. This is obviously different to Truma and things like that, which you can't substitute the Kedusha. That which is Truma, and that's why we have to rely on Bittul and all sorts of things like that. But over here, that's what you do with the Maaser Sheni, says Rashi. And then he says, Akol Chulin. Chachamim say no. They say everything's Chulin. Chachamim say, since you didn't find it exactly the same as you left it, Tolin Lakel. We say it, we assume, okay, this isn't what you left. You left behind a maneh of Maaser Sheni, and now there's Matayim. So you've obviously taken the Maaser Sheni and put it somewhere else. And therefore, we can treat all of this as chulin. That's how Chachamim say. Right? And you must have put this. And you forgot. Right? We based on the principle that a person wouldn't place chulin and maaser sheni together. You keep them separate. Okay, so that is the first case of the Beitzah. Now, the second case, which is the opposite, maybe complementary case, is like this. Third line in of the wide lines of the Gemara. Hiniach matayim umatzamane. Okay, so here is the opposite case. The first case was you remember leaving behind 100 of Maaser Sheni, and now you found more. The other case is actually you remember leaving 200 of Maaser Sheni, you come back and you find less. Right, so this is obviously parallel to the case now in our Mishnah, where you designated 3 birds, you come back and you find 2 birds. You started off with more, and there's now less. The question is that lesser component, is that part of what was there originally? Or do we say no, because it's changed, because it's something different? What was there originally is no longer there, and this is something else. So, iniach matayim u'matzah maneh, maneh monach maneh mutar divrei Rabbi. Rabbi says, yes, you had, there was 100 there, and that was placed there, and it was taken away. What's left is still Maaser Sheni. The Chachamim omrim hakol chulin, and Chachamim say, no, everything is chulin. Says Rashi, right? Maneh mutar. Says nish'al hach maneh mimaser. This maneh that you find there, that's left over from the maser. Say Chachamim hakol chulin. Ho'il v'lo elau liYerushalayim lo iflidan ze mizeh. Right? You wouldn't have separated again. Chachamim's assumption is you keep all your Maaser Sheni together. You're not going to start, if Maaser Sheni in this box, Maaser Sheni in that box. Now it's time for Aliyah L'Rega. I have to go. I have to find all my Maaser Sheni. No, person doesn't do that. You wouldn't have separated them. Ushnehem Nadlan v'nichad makom acher. You took them both parts, all 200, and you put it somewhere else for safekeeping. Not such safekeeping because you forgot where you put it. But in any event. And it must be that you brought a separate maneh, which is chulin, and you placed it there, and you forgot about it. By the way, so you could say at this point that if we understand right what Chachamim are saying over here seems to be, the way Rashi explains it, seems to be based on the psychology, seems to be based on the fact that, right, why am I saying that everything here is chulin and it's not part of the Maaser Sheni? So Chachamim said, in the first case, a person isn't going to go and mix their chulin and Maaser Sheni and keep it together. You're going to keep it separate. In the second case, they say a person's not going to split up the Maaser Sheni that they have. This seems to be sort of an umdana going on. There's a psychological reason. So you might say, the Gemara doesn't say this, but you might say the distinction that you can't really compare the two cases. We'll see a different chiluk the Gemara makes. But in our Mishnah, we're talking about birds, whether the birds are still there, whether they flew away or not. That's one question. Yeah, you're talking about whether a person left the money in this box. Okay, we're based on the fact that a person wouldn't leave the Maaser Sheni together or not. Maybe you could say the cases are therefore not actually similar, and therefore we can't learn it. That's just a thought. I haven't seen that the Gemara doesn't use that explanation. Maybe we could read it into the Gemara, but in any event, let's keep it simple with the pshat. But what we see is that, again, our question is, when we start off with something more, and then we come back and we find a smaller component of that, Rabbi says, we assume that smaller component is part of what was there before. The maneh that you find is part of the matayim that was there originally. And therefore, Rabbi would also say that the 2 birds you find are part of the 3 birds that were there originally. That works. That's according to Rabbi. But according to Rabbanan, it does not seem to work. So says the Gemara, afilu teima Rabbanan. Actually, you could say that it works. Our Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbanan as well. How so? Ha'itma ala. Right, we have the Amoraim say relating to this Beitzah. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Eliezer, the Amri Tarvayu, Shani Gozalot, or Il Va'asuyin Ledadot. Okay, we say like this. We say, why do we say we don't compare our case of the birds to that case of the Beitzah with the Maaser Sheni? Because the Gozalot or Asuyin Ledadot, they move around, they waddle around, right? The understanding here is that we're probably talking about gozalot, about birds that are still young birds. They can't really fly on their own, but they can they can move, they can waddle around. Says Rashi or il vasuyin. Sorry, shani gozalot. He says lahachi ikalamema echad alach This is why by birds we can say that one's gone, but the others have stayed around. This is the way they move around, one at a time. The mani is not going to get up and walk by itself. Sometimes it feels that way, but that's not what's going to happen. Only when you pick it up. When you pick it up, you pick it all up together. So maybe that is maybe really that we could read into this explanation of the Gemara what I explained before. That's what Rashi says. He says with the mani, when you pick it up, you would pick it up all together, but the birds can walk by themselves. Okay, so at that point, we could resolve our Mishnah together with the opinion of Rabbanan. But now the Gemara says, do we have to go so far? This difference of Shani Gozalot, maybe it's not even necessary to give that explanation. Maybe there's a simpler way to resolve our Mishnah with the opinion of Rabbanan as well. So we say like this. It says the Gemara continues. Why do we have to give this explanation? Why do we have to say come with this chiluk of shani gozalot? Because they can move around. There's a simpler way. Okay, we now see that in that case of Rabbi and Rabbanan regarding the Maser Sheni, there is a machloket Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar as to how to explain what actually was the case that they were arguing about. We always have throughout Shas. We always try and limit machlokot as much as we can. So actually, we'll say Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi and Rabbanan were not arguing about every case. They were only arguing about a specific case regarding the Maser Sheni, but there's another specific case which they were not arguing about. So it depends. We don't know who says what, but Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Eliezer, each one says one of these cases. So Izma ala da'ai Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Eliezer. Chad amar bishnei kisin machloket, aval bekis echad divrei hakol chulin. V'chad amar bekis echad machloket, aval bishnei kisin divrei hakol maneh munach umaneh mutar. Okay, so two different opinions as to what precisely the machloket was, two more or less opposite opinions. Say like this. Again, just before we said that Rabbi was the one who says that whatever you found was part of the original, what was there, and therefore we still consider it to be Maser Sheni. And Chachamim said, no, whatever we find, whatever was originally there is gone, and what we find now is something new. So the question is, were they disagreeing where you have we said you have it in a box, in a wallet, or some sort of thing. Is there where you have one pocket or where you have two pockets, right? Two different. So Chad Amar Bishnei Kisin Machloket. So the first opinion is that the Machloket between Rabbi and Rabbanan is only where you have two separate compartments. Aval Bekis Echad, but if it's all in one compartment, everybody agrees, like Chachamim. If it's in one compartment, you wouldn't split it up. And then the second opinion is no. If it's in one compartment, that's precisely their machloket. But if it's in two separate ones, so then everybody agrees with Rabbi. If you have the money in two separate compartments, and you come back and you find only one of the compartments is still full, so then everybody would agree that is still Maser Sheni. So okay, so Rashi says here, Lama li l'shnuya ala, Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Elazar, ma dochkin litlotam mishnatenu b'medadim. Okay, why do we have to go and explain? Because at the end of the day, to say that our Mishnah, the explanation is where they're medadim, when these birds are sort of wandering, and only one of them at a time is going to walk out, and the others aren't. It's a little bit of a dochak explanation. So, haladidu metukemet shapir karabanan, we could say it. We could explain it either way, like Rabbanan, without having to go into this reasoning. right? We have this is the machloket, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, relating to Maaser Sheni. Chad Amar machloket b'munachin shnei amanin b'kis echad. One of them says the machloket is only where both manot are in one compartment. V'hahu dekamri Rabbanan dikshenatal kolakis natan. That's where Rabbanan say that when you took something out, you took out everything. Aval, because it's all in one compartment. Aval b'shnei kisim modu echad natal v'niach hashani. But Rabbanan would agree with Rabbi, where you have two compartments, whatever you took out from one, still left in the other one. That was one understanding. V'chad amar, and the second explanation was machloket b'shnei kisim. No, that it's precisely in two compartments. That's their machloket. But if it's one compartment, then Rabbi would agree with Chachamim. Okay, so now, how does that relate to our Mishnah? So says the Gemara, 6 lines from the bottom, last word. It says, Bishlam alamanda ma bishnei kisin machloket, haynu de'itzich l'shnoi yehacha shani gozalot, or il v'asuyin ladadot. According to the one who says that the machloket Rabbi and Rabbanan is where you have two different compartments, so that is precisely analogous to our case, where you have different birds, right? You have different birds, you have different compartments where the money is kept. That since that is a machloket over there, we think it's the same machloket over here, and therefore we have to give the explanation that no, birds are different because they waddle around. אלא למד אמר בכיס אחד מחלוקת, אבל בשני כיסים דברי הכל, מנה מונח ומנה מותר. But according to the one who says, no, the machloket between Rabbi and Rabbanan was only in one compartment. But if the money is kept in two different kisim, in two different compartments, well, that's similar to the case, to our case. And we're saying over there, everybody agrees. Rabbanan agree with Rabbi that it's maneh munach, maneh mutal. So Rabbanan would also agree that one of the birds left and one of the birds is still here. Two of the birds are still here. So I don't need, according to that explanation, I don't need this reasoning. So hashta lama li lishnoi ala. Hamal b'shnei kisin no plege. Why do I need to change it? Why do I need to say that it's different? It's exactly the case of two compartments. And there's no machloket. So Rav Ashi says, no, I'll tell you why you need to say it. Because hacha begozalot mekushalim v'kisim mekushalim maskina. Because we are dealing with where you have the birds are, even if the birds are tied together, or the kisim, the wallets are tied together as well. Right, that is the case that we're dealing with, and therefore that you have to say the difference is as follows. He says gozalot menatchei hadadi, kisin lo menatchei hadadi. In other words, the because the birds they can sort of, even if they're tied together, the fact that they walk around, they will like loosen the knots and loosen that which is tying them together, and they might break free, and therefore it's different. But when it comes to kisim, when it comes to wallet, right, it's tied up together. That is all going to be. That's going to stay the way it is. In other words, when we say with kis echad or shnei kisin, it doesn't actually, according to this explanation, it doesn't actually mean kis echad. It means the money is kept in two separate compartments, but they are tied together. And since they are tied together, therefore that is like kis echad. But with the gozalot, with the birds, even if they're tied together, we don't consider that as what we consider that they are separate, because they can go and they can separate themselves. Rabbi amar lecha, Rabbi now says, he says, well, kisin nami zimnin demit'akel kataraya. That also with the wallets or the bags, wherever we're keeping the money, even if they're tied together, sometimes the rope gets frayed, whatever it is, and they can separate as well. And therefore, that is that's why Rabbi disagrees. Okay, so bottom line, at the end of the day, we say that our Mishnah could fit with the opinion of Chachamim, but it has to be that there is a distinction. There's a distinction between the wallets and the birds, because the birds can go along and separate themselves. Again, according to Rabbi, we don't require that, because he says the wallets could separate themselves as well. That's obviously that one's not going to get up and walk away, but that's what happens. Sometimes you tie a knot and the knot comes undone, and that's what Rashi says. The top of Daf Yud Aleph. Top of Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph says the mitakel katarayu, that the knot gets loosened. Nitar hakesher shelahem, it gets opened up. Umitparek me'elav, and it does v'aba v'natal shema lo mekushalim mitzam, meaning the person who came along when you came and took the money, maybe you found it, they weren't tied together. And therefore you only took one. You didn't take both. Okay, I'll just quickly read the next case, and then I guess we'll carry on with that a little bit more next week. But we said betoch haken umatzah lifnei haken asulin. So again, in the Mishnah, we saw the next case was that if you came and you had designated the birds that were inside the ken, and then you came and you found them in front of the ken, that's going to be forbidden. We're going to say these are different birds. They're not the ones that you had where you left them. And then the Mishnah said, if those are only birds that are there in the vicinity, there were no others, so then it would be mutar. So here again, the Gemara is going to suggest something that we saw already. We saw this yesterday, but the question was, is this now again a proof for Rabbi Chanina relating to Rov versus Karov? We saw that those were the two indications that we have throughout Shas. When you're trying to discover where something came from, you go by the parameter of Rov, or you could go by the parameter of Karov, by the majority or by proximity. And the question is, if we only have one of those, then that each of those would be a satisfactory parameter to rely on. But if both are contradictory, which one trumps the other? So we say Rov or Karov, Rov. That's what Rabbi Chanina says. So at this point, the Gemara says maybe this is a proof for Rabbi Chanina, because if you go by Karov, well, the closest birds were the ones that were there in the can when you found them. But if we go by Rov, that is the majority of birds in the world are not the ones that we set aside. So same question we asked yesterday, right? Rov versus Karov. The Gemara is actually going to give the same answer. Really, the answer on yesterday's daf was taken from the one on today's daf. Okay, Ad Khan. We'll pick it up from there next week. Good day, everybody.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.